Georgetown's Chief Information Security Officer, Mike is responsible for establishing and implementing a strategy to secure Georgetown University's computers, networks, and data. His focus will be implementing enterprise-wide security programs that ensure Georgetown's ability to provide academic excellence and diverse research opportunities. Please join me in welcoming Mike Saxton.
Thank you. Looks like everybody's over here, so I'll try to do like a 80-20 split. So my name is Mike Saxton, Chief Information Security Officer. Basically, Wi-Fi, computers, networks, georgetown.edu, sort of all falls, well, it does fall under my responsibilities for security. The brief I'm going to present is meant to be more of a conversation starter, so please don't let me just flip through slides. Raise your hand, yell at me, throw something at me. Really want to have some conversation based around this. A lot of the material that I'll present today is sort of the best practices as I would be telling anybody that wants to find out more about cybersecurity or cyber crimes or how to prevent them. And some of this is rooted in industry standards from a cybersecurity standpoint. Some of the stuff that we'll talk about, I will mention, is things that the university has for you. And other things, I'll just give examples, websites to go check out, maybe some alternative apps if you want to download those to take some of the, when we get to the how do I secure myself slide. So to get started again, we'll talk about what is cybercrime, what are they after, why are they after it. We'll go a little bit on how do you protect yourself, and then finally, I think I missed what to do when you've been hacked. There was also a bullet point that did not make it into the slides on alternative storage locations for information other than the cloud. Happy to talk about that as sort of a last parting words before I get out of here. So, what is cybercrime? The authoritative source of Wikipedia tells us basically that it is any sort of crime that happens on a network or involving computers. That's a pretty vague description as far as what cybercrime is. So when we begin going into the types of it, there's multiple different things that can constitute as cybercrime. Some of these are more relevant to those to you all than others. Phishing is the #1 way to get into a network, to get into email, to get into really anything that anybody owns. We can go over some ways that they use to do that. Botnets are malware that are installed on your network that allows a person or an entity to talk to multiple different computers at once. You may hear things in the news like denial of service or distributed denial of service attacks. Those are typically launched from botnets where an attacker will use your computer to launch an attack. Identity theft, we see, I don't want to say quite a lot, but we do get a lot of attempts here at the university to act as somebody else. Funny story, we actually had a male caller get a high-pitched voice and try to call the help desk to reset a woman's password on her email. So we get a lot of different things coming in for us. And sensitive content and blackmail. That's probably, when it comes to phishing emails or cyber crimes or exploiting people, that's what we see a lot of right now. I don't know if any of you have received it or if you've had friends that have received it, but one of the common themes that we see right now around the university is I've hacked your computer, I've recorded everything that you've done on your webcam, and including the sites that you shouldn't be going to, and I'm going to release those to the world and embarrass you. Unless you pay me $10,000 right now. We get maybe 1 to 2 of those emails a week people are reporting to us, and our report numbers are pretty low. So that's a common way to use social engineering, which is trying to play with the psychology of people to get them to do something that you want to do. But that's a common theme that we see right now. Unwanted software, we'll talk a little bit about at the end. Online scams, nobody here has an uncle that died and left millions of dollars, I don't think. But that's a still pretty prevalent thing to this day. And then cyber stalking and bullying as well. We've got some preventative measures in the end that will help you secure your accounts or your systems. if something does happen like that. So what are they after? I hear a lot of times people say, and my father is one of them, oh, it's my email, who cares if they get in? But there's a lot of value in who you are as a person to attackers for malicious purposes. And when we talk about cybersecurity, it can be a little tough because a lot of the numbers and statistics you'll see in the press are typically based around commercial organizations, right? We'll talk over on your right-hand side, $1.5 trillion. That didn't come from hacking my email. But to get into the accounts, they're after your contacts is one of the number one things that I've seen in the past. Your email may be, or you may feel your email is pretty insignificant. But if you have a parent that is an executive officer at a large Fortune 10 company, the success rate of a malicious actor sending an email to your parent saying, hey, click this link, and then clicking it is probably pretty low. If they can act as you and send that link and say, hey, click this link, the success rate of them actually clicking that is much higher. At which rate they can download malware, they can try to get your credentials by saying, locking up a Facebook website, you can enter your Facebook credentials into it, etc. Reset your password emails are pretty big. If you can get into an account, reset the password, it's essentially locked down for a period of time. A couple of years ago, there was a group called the Syrian Electronic Army that hacked the White House's webpage, and it had a pretty substantial effect on the stock market momentarily, but it was a pretty substantial attack. Passwords, credit cards, I hate to admit it, but I know people still store credit cards, PIN numbers, passports, etc. on their computers. And certainly if people can get into your computer or into your email or G Drive or wherever that is, that can be taken. Business dealings, contracts, and personal information, that gets a little bit more into the corporate world of everything, but tax information and personal conversations. When we get into, we talk about cyberbullying or cyber stalking, etc., those personal conversations are really where that sort of comes to play. Why are they after it? Financial motives remain the number one reason for data breaches. Again, there's a lot of statistics around that based at the corporate level. Cyber revenue hits 1.5 trillion annually. Again, that's going to come from my email. Yeah, go ahead.
What is that? Is that people paying the person that stole my identity? Or?
Correct. So it's a couple different things. So there is a fairly substantial market for the revenue that comes from that, and that is where that number comes from. If you see below that, there's 21 million Gmail accounts for sale on the dark web for $450. Not a lot of money, right? But where you really start getting into that is if I can get into Bank of America's computer, install ransomware, and now I'm saying you have to pay me $10 million to release this to release this data, or release this ransom malware from your computer. Where that number goes up significantly is when you begin looking at the financial obligations of the organizations to remediate that as well. So if you can launch a large-scale cyber attack on an organization that completely demolishes their infrastructure, the amount of money they have to pay into that is pretty significant, and you can do some serious damage on the not just the reputation, but also the checkbook of large organizations. There's a lot more when you get into it. There was, I don't know if you all heard about it in the news, but there was like the online site that sold drugs on the internet, the Silk Road. There's intellectual property and commercial information. I'm trying to remember the term for it right now, but basically corporate espionage is what it comes down to. So that all plays into that. Pepsi wanting Coke secret recipe, or somebody wanting KFC's, 7 spice recipes, something like that. So while the revenue remains while the motive remains pretty high with money, the amounts are pretty low. You see $450 for 21 million Gmail account, or 21 million Gmail accounts, and 250 for 5 million Yahoo accounts. But again, having access to that and being able to log into those and to grow and grow and grow and capture more, if you are not sending emails from that address, if you are not doing anything malicious, you just are in there, That's a pretty good foothold that can then be expanded as you get into different accounts. And then at the same time, if you do begin sending sending emails rather, you can sneak in and send things at a fairly large rate of speed, which then can then send a link out to somebody else, which can then download malware, and you're exponentially growing with the different footholds that you can grab. Finally, 81% of compromises resulted from stolen and weak passwords. So one of the things we're crafting up right now in UIS is, I don't know how many of you heard that there was a massive breach of usernames and passwords recently. 700 million logins were released on the internet, or were found on the internet rather. Of that, there was a fairly substantial amount of those that came back with @georgetown.edu. So we're currently crafting up an email, just an informational email to let everybody know. But typical things, things like password reuse, where you use the same login for Twitter and Facebook and your Gmail and whatever other site you may go to, is still pretty prevalent. So if I can get your login information from Gmail, and I can track and type your login to Google and find out where that email is registered in different locations, I can try to reuse that password in different locations. Any questions on that?
Yeah, is that mitigated by a password manager?
Yeah, so that's one of the things we're going to go over. There's a couple different steps that you can take. Password manager, as well as dual factor and multi-factor, or two-factor and multi-factor authentication as well. Speaking of, how do you protect yourself? So, to your point, we do have two-factor and multi-factor authentication. In the security world, we tend to rely what we call accessibility around three tenets: what you have, what you know, and what you are. So you talk about things like what you are. iPhone 8 had and Samsung Galaxy, whatever model they're on right now, had fingerprint readers at one point. That fits two of these. You have to have it in your hand in order to prove that you have the phone. And the second thing is that you have your fingerprint, or now Face ID. With the implementation of two-factor, so Duo, here at school, which you can go to apps.georgetown.edu and download and register, that now allows you to put that two-factor into getting into your email. So you log in, I put in saxtonm@georgetown.edu, I put in my password. Historically, that would have been enough, and I would have been into the email, I would have had G Drive, I would have had access to anything that what we call OAuth. If any of you ever linked your or logged into another website other than Google with your Gmail address before. So that now allows you access to all those sites, and you can actually find those buried deep inside your account. Well, not too deep, but buried inside your account settings. Some other mechanisms for two-factor or multi-factor authentication are Google Authenticator. Works on the same premise. You log in and you get code on your phone that you now have to put in somewhere else. And then for those that are a little more paranoid or want a little bit more security, there's things called YubiKeys and Google Titans. YubiKeys are a USB device that plugs into your USB, and when you go to log into your Georgetown email address, it still sends you to Duo, but it says touch your YubiKey. There's a button on top. You hit that, and it sends the signal saying that is you sitting in front of your computer because you hit the button as a way to get into systems. Google uses Google Titan, and if you look at the news, over a year period after rolling out, Google never became subject to a phishing attack at that point. They had a 0% success rate with anything that came in. There is a fantastic website to check out. So outside of Duo or Google Authenticator, there's a website called, I always forget it, turnon2fa.com. You can go to turnon2fa.com and type in anything that you deal with on a regular basis, and if they have two-factor authentication, it will tell you how to do it. Myself, I bank with a bank called USAA, and they don't use either of these tools, unfortunately. They use a tool put out by Symantec, which is traditionally a security company or an antivirus company. But that does allow me to download that application onto my phone, so whenever I log into USAA and I want to pay my bills, check my bank account, etc., it sends me a code to my phone that says, put this in. Again, if you remember, the number one Reason for cybercrime is financial benefit or financial motives. So having access to my bank account, while not much in there to the tune of trillions of dollars, would give somebody a couple bucks for the day. Any questions on Duo? I know that's kind of a big thing around campus right now. Some of you may have heard of it, may have not have heard of it. As a show of hands, how many people actually use Duo? Awesome. Any of you use something other than Duo? That's cool too. We're pushing Duo, but happy to have two-factor. Okay. If you look up two-factor on the internet, there's a couple different schools of thought. I'm of anything that puts something in front of logging in other than a username and password is good. You'll also see some things out there on SMS two-factor. So when I log into my personal Twitter account, it sends me a text message to my phone saying use this code to log in. That's another mechanism as well. Need any help with Duo? If you ever have any issues, head to Georgetown, help@georgetown.edu.
Yeah.
I have a question about the enter a passcode option.
Yeah.
Does that passcode reset?
That
Or is it the
passcode,
standard passcode?
that passcode is the last numbers of your Go card, and I can't remember which numbers it is. So it will be, whatever your Go card, whatever random portion of the Go card number that is on there. You can use that as well. And again, that goes back to the two-factor as well by saying you have to have this card. You're saying who you are when you log in, and now you have to have this card with you as well to authenticate it. So, and just so everybody knows, we get about 12 or so on average emails a day of fraudulent Duo logins. So when you go to log into Duo, you get a push to your phone that says authenticate, you're coming in. That means that about 12 people a day are sitting in their classrooms, at their desk, at their house, and they get a notification saying somebody's trying to log into their account. It's a couple thousand attempts a year that students, faculty, and staff at Georgetown are facing. Yeah.
You mentioned about Duo being rolled out to the students. Are everyone supposed to do using Duo?
Yeah, so traditionally, we rolled it out to staff first, and we're almost a complete success rate with Georgetown staff. Next is going to be faculty, and then after faculty, we want to make students enroll in it as much as possible, and we highly recommend that they are enrolled in it. I do foresee at some point of everybody has to be enrolled in it eventually. What couple things that we work with on a regular basis? We have a lot of folks that travel overseas. We have some folks that travel out to China where they have to deal with the internet that China has. So we run into a couple different things, but that's where things like the Go card come into play and different mitigation measures to get around that security. So, at the end of the day, we'd like everybody to be registered eventually.
So for those students who are working right now and getting to access GMS or phase supposed to
Yeah, I believe that, I think student staff, I can't remember the exact term that we're using for it, but they will be part of the initial push to enroll into Duo. Right now, we're basically looking at everybody but students. And that's typically how we look at security at a university, protect the business functions, and then we have the students as well. So, but yeah, great question. Actually, we have, as of now, as of yesterday, there's over 16,600 people currently registered in Duo. So it has a pretty good success rate so far for implementation. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe that some of the students were told that they will be blocked from putting in their time in GMS if they don't sign up for Duo. Is that correct?
Yes, Duo or GMS is now behind Duo, so they will have to enroll in Duo in order to get into GMS. That's correct. And for those that we do have some faculty that don't like cell phones. So there is a number that can call your landline phone and give you a code over the phone as well. So there's multiple different ways that you can get into it. Recognize possible phishing attempts. We see a ton of phishing attempts a day, a week. Google does a pretty good job at picking a lot of it out. Actually, a lot of the spam email that we get sent to the security team is, hey, I found this in my junk mail. Is it legit? So Google's doing a pretty good job at keeping a lot of these things out. But some things to watch out for: sent from someone you don't know, or an email that you shouldn't expect. I should not be receiving an email from my father saying that he is out of money and needs train fare in France right now because I talked to him on my way over here and he's in South Carolina. Urgent wording or spelling errors, those are common things, especially when we deal with folks that are doing this from overseas. You watch your sentence structure is always a little backwards, or it's very, very important. Google, so Alphabet and then Google, there's a team under Alphabet called, shoot, I can't remember the name of the team, but if you go to phishingquiz.withgoogle.com, they have implemented a test to test for phishing emails right now. And in doing that, they actually give you access to very well-known phishing attempts that have happened. And you get to find out where these very successful high-level phishing attempts have, what those indicators are that maybe could have been noticed before. To your point on password managers, unique and strong passwords. A lot of different thoughts on how to create a strong password. My typical talking point is 8 characters minimum, one uppercase, one lowercase, one uppercase, one number, one special character. Unfortunately, there are a lot of places that don't allow the special characters, so try to mix it up as much as possible. But that's the standard that I typically tell everybody. Now, there are different cases for password managers out there, LastPass, 1Password, Dashlane, etc., that you can download that have browser extensions or they install onto your computer. If I go to a website and I need to register my username and password, or I need to register for a username and then a password, I can right-click, generate password. I set the length of it up to 64 characters, some go longer, and it automatically applies it and then captures it in what they call your vault. So now I don't have to think of a password, I don't have to remember a password, it's just there and ready for me to use. Suspect it has anything to do with bank accounts or anything like that, contact your bank immediately, you can put a hold on it. And you can also just have them monitor it as well, and they'll increase your security a little bit. And finally, monitor your credit. This is a pretty great thing that you can do now. 3 different tools here, there's more out there, but Privacy Guard, Credit Karma, and Identity Force. They routinely monitor your credit for any accounts that have been pulled or any malicious activity. I applied for a car a couple of weeks ago, and within 10 minutes I got a ping on my phone saying somebody just applied for a credit loan at XYZ bank. The other thing that's great about it is you can keep track of who keeps checking your credit score, which gets really annoying when these credit card vendors want to keep sending you credit cards saying apply for a credit card and they are running your credit. So that's another great way to keep an eye on it. Before I go into questions, one thing I did want to cover before I moved on was, is there any place else to store things other than the cloud? Yes. USB drives, USB hard drives, etc. are all, and your computer itself is all a good place to store information if you don't want to put something in the cloud. That said, I do highly recommend that you do hard drive encryption, or you encrypt the USB. If you're on a Mac, use FileVault. If you're on a Windows computer, use Defender, I think it is. If you have a USB, you can encrypt it to include the software that it has, or even a USB hard drive that you can carry around with you. I'll make sure you lock all that down. I keep typically my tax documents, my personal, copies of my passport, copies of my driver's license, etc., on a portable hard drive that's encrypted that I keep at home, just in case I need something I traditionally don't like to steal. Put it on my laptop because I go on public Wi-Fi spots, etc. So that's what I had for you guys today. Are there any questions for anybody in the room? Yeah.
Well, you're saying nervous with your last comment. So when I go to Starbucks, and I've joined the Starbucks, Google, Wi-Fi, whatever,
Good point.
should I now remove, sensitive text contents or whatever?
Yeah, so that's traditionally why I don't store stuff on here. And you bring that up, it's free. Using a VPN is always a good thing to do when you're accessing public Wi-Fi. Public Wi-Fi is public, it's available for everybody, and you know, it's a way for people to have access to places that they shouldn't be having. If you do have something, you know, keep it in an encrypted folder, keep the files encrypted, something along that way if you do want to store it locally. Any VPNs out there that you can find, you know, a lot of them are really good. There's some science behind how to pick the right one, but you know, for most of us, the first ones that pop into people are going to be pretty good. Or if you check out like Wired or Lifehacker, they have some good recommendations as well. But anytime you're on public Wi-Fi, I would definitely recommend using a VPN. And if you do have those files on your computer, again, look at encrypting them or moving them off altogether. Okay. So, anything else? Yeah.
I'm a little ignorant to the terminology.
Sure.
Could you explain VPN?
Yes, virtual private network. So what a VPN does is it acts as a secure communication mechanism to wherever you are going out on the internet. So we use VPNs on a regular basis when I'm at home. If we have something that comes up, a security incident, or we need reports run, I can VPN, which means I have dialed directly into Georgetown's network, and I now have access as though I am here in the building. What you use VPNs for, let's say you go to Starbucks, is you need to go to Starbucks and you know you have an assignment that's due, or you have a project that you need to submit. I do not recommend doing your banking on public Wi-Fi, no matter what you put in place, but I'll leave that up to you, personal decision. But let's say you want to go on Facebook, for example, right? You would go into your VPN, which would then act as a client on your computer. And when you log in, you'll log in with the username and password. And what that will do is it will secure your communication until it gets to another computer, which it's routed directly there. So in public Wi-Fi, what can happen is people can go in and direct the traffic to their own sort of server that's monitoring what you're doing. With the VPN, what you're doing is encrypting that traffic so that it goes to, you know, let's say NordVPN has commercials all over the place. So if you log into NordVPN, it's encrypting all of your information, going to NordVPN servers where it's encrypted, and then it's going out to the broader internet. So it's just a way to keep your information safe and secure. So if it were to get intercepted, it would be encrypted and it couldn't be read at that point. So, does that help a little bit? Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Anything else? No? All right. Well, if you guys have any questions at all, you know, don't hesitate to email security@georgetown.edu. Typically takes us maybe 3 days to get back to you or so. But if you need anything, email that address. Otherwise, have a great night, and I will turn it back over.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we'd like to if we could just give another round of applause to the speaker. I really enjoyed this workshop. I don't know about you guys, but I had handed out a survey, and it would be really helpful if you could also put your name on net ID and fill out the survey and give us your best feedback on our workshop tonight. And please feel free to take some more pizza, salad, or drinks if you are still hungry or want to just simply take something to go. Thank you for coming.